Alright, so for constructing your slab, you want to make sure that your slab is at leather hard. As you can see, it's a little bit flexible, but it's not super bendy like that is. Okay, just a little bit. You don't want it turning white though, because that would be bad. That would be bone dry. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to score, or I want to lay my piece on top. So breaking up those platelets, doing that on both pieces. Okay. And I only need to score where they're going to be touching. I don't need to be scoring like all three little sides there. Notice that my walls are all evenly thickened, so that way I use the guide sticks. So scoring. You guys could use your serrated rib. I just didn't have one at home, so I'm just using a needle tool. So I'm going to grab my slip cup. Make sure that your slip is actually kind of goopy, not too runny, not too thick. Kind of like a pudding consistency, more or less. So I'm just going to paint that on. If your piece is a little bit drier, it doesn't hurt to even go back and rescore, just to make sure that that moisture is really put in there. The biggest thing that you want your pieces to do is to actually shrink together when you join them. If you don't do this, then they could possibly fall apart. We will be actually adding some coils as well, just to kind of reinforce our edges, so that way they really join and make a nice tight bond and shrink together. So again, just kind of going back and scoring. This piece was a little bit drier than the other, but it was still leather hard. Like I said, wasn't turning white, but I'm just going to be a little bit more liberal with that. Place it on top, making sure that my corners are joined. Now my bottom piece is a little bit softer. I would recommend it be a little bit stiffer, but especially for your larger pieces, you want them to be a little bit stiffer, just because, as you'll be able to see in a second, I'm going to need it to stand up. Okay, so I'm going to push down just a little bit. I'm just smoothing out that edge. Just using my finger is fine. Smoothing out the edges where they join together, because if it starts pulling away, that's where it's going to pull away first, is in those little corners. So I'm just going to take a chunk of clay. It could be a coil, it could just be some leftovers that you have, and I'm going to use that as a support while I'm working. So this would not work if my clay was plastic and super soft. It would just fall down. So this is why working at the leather hard stage is really good. And remember, bone dry would be bad. So I'm going to just roll a little coil. Just a real skinny one, a lot smaller than you would have done for your coil project, because it's just going to be kind of like you would put in the shower so water doesn't get through. You're just going to join it. It's a real skinny little coil. Place that in there. I'm going to push it in. I'm going to support my wall. Might even be better to put your hand below. And so I always kind of double check that you're not pushing so much that you're pushing the wall off, though. Making sure that my clay touches both pieces. This is another thing too, if when pieces are bone dry, it doesn't matter how much clay you put on. When it's in the plastic stage on bone dry clay, it's just going to fall off later, because they're not even near the same level of moisture. So when they're plastic to leather hard, they become homogeneous as they dry, or they're going to become the same level of moisture. Alright, so nice and smooth there. Easier to take care of it now, since it's a nice open space versus trying to put my hand in there later when I have all the walls put together. So I'm going to do the other side. So if you notice, I have my side walls here. They're the skinnier ones. They're kind of like the skinny sides. And my big areas I'm going to do some sgraffito on. So I'm placing both my pieces on top. Now if you're going to do more of a box, I would recommend laying them out just a little bit different. You might even have to trim a little bit of your walls, but that's okay. Remember, cylinders you can construct at the plastic stage. You don't have to wait. Unless they're really, really wide, which most likely they are not. So So scoring, slipping. Notice that I'm not trying to touch my clay a whole lot. The more you touch it, the more it dries out. And especially with slab, what's great about slab is you can make it very geometric and have some really nice crisp edges, but you have to be very diligent about how you take care of your clay. So I'm not touching it with really sticky fingers, so having that brush with my slip really, really helps. It doesn't mean you can't touch your clay at all, just sometimes too much is not a good thing. So my finger works the best here because I know I can apply the right amount of pressure just to kind of get the slip in there, push down a little bit, push in, really clean up those corners. Some tools just don't work as well as your fingers do. And in some cases your fingers don't work, so just figure out what works best for you. Alright, so again, making a little stilt so that way my wall will stand up. So both of those larger walls are for sure at leather hard. Adding my little coil to reinforce my walls and my joint. Alright, last but not least is going to be my last sidewall, and then I'm going to worry about my bottom and my top. For this video I'm not going to add the top quite yet, just because I don't want to have one wall getting more squished. I'm going to add that a little bit later, but being how I'm going to do my cover, it'll be just fine. My small opening is actually going to be my cover. My bottom is going to be arched a little bit, so I do want to apply that when it's a little bit softer than normal, just so it does get a little bit of a sag, so that way it appears to raise off the table a little. Okay, so this one I'm scoring on both sides, scoring my two walls that are sticking straight up. I'll slip and I'll lay that on top. This one's a little on the soft side. Okay, so I just have to kind of support it. Be extra careful. I'd normally want this a little bit stiffer, but not a ton stiffer. Alright, so looking at the inside, the difference between having the reinforced wall and the non-reinforced wall. Okay, so you should have a nice smooth transition. There shouldn't be a line there. You can always go back and add a line, say with like a rubber shaper. If you need one of those, I can give you one. Alright, so right now I'm just taking my rib tool, my metal rib particularly. You could use a rib tool, like a wooden rib, and I'm just smoothing out those joints, and I'm pushing in a little bit, compressing it to really make those bond and stay so they would shrink together. Even just using your fingers is great. Kind of reinforcing that kind of curve that I have on that particular wall. Notice I don't have a box, so if you have a box form, is there any little adjustments that you could do just to give your silhouette of your piece just a little bit more interest? A lot of people do boxes, a lot of people do cylinders because those are your go-to easy things. How can you make this piece a one of a kind while you're working? Alright, so I put the large piece on top. I've already smoothed it out a whole lot. I just added it the same. The only difference is there's a little bit on the softer side, and I actually kind of used the metal rib tool to smooth it in so it would get a little bit of a curve, so it's not completely flat. Okay, so just supporting it, smoothing it out. And I'll be able to go back to this tomorrow and smooth it out some more, and even use a rasp, that little cheese grater looking tool, to shave down any particularly rough areas. But the rib is a fantastic tool, especially for slab. Enjoy. Have fun.